Chosen one, listen carefully, because the version of you that people thought they understood is gone. They looked at your smile and thought they had your entire story figured out. They saw your kindness and assumed you were easy to manipulate. They saw your patience and thought you would tolerate anything. They watched you remain calm while they created chaos and convinced themselves that you simply didn't understand what was happening. But they were wrong. You understood more than you ever said. While they were busy talking, you were listening. While they were making assumptions, you were observing. While they were celebrating what they thought was their victory, you were learning the patterns behind their behavior. They thought you were playing checkers. You were learning chess. And the most surprising thing about you was that you never needed to announce it. You didn't have to tell everyone how intelligent you were. You didn't need to prove that you could see through people. You didn't need to expose every lie the moment you discovered it. You simply watched. You waited. You remembered. And eventually, their own actions told you everything you needed to know. Chosen one, there was a season when your heart was so open that you gave people chances they didn't deserve. You forgave things that should have taught you to walk away sooner. You remained loyal to people who weren't loyal to you. You kept explaining yourself to people who had already decided to misunderstand you. But every experience taught you something. Every betrayal sharpened your discernment. Every disappointment strengthened your boundaries. Every painful chapter taught you to stop giving unlimited access to people who had never earned it. And then something changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. One day, you simply stopped reacting the way they expected. You stopped chasing. You stopped begging. You stopped explaining. You stopped trying to convince people of your value. And that was the moment they realized they had underestimated you. Because the person they knew depended on their approval. The person standing before them no longer does. Your silence became stronger than your arguments. Your peace became stronger than their provocations. Your discipline became stronger than your emotions. And your faith became stronger than your fear. They thought your smile meant surrender. They didn't realize it meant peace. They thought your kindness meant weakness. They didn't realize it meant strength under control. They thought your silence meant you had nothing to say. They didn't realize you had already understood everything. Chosen one, you didn't become heartless. You became wise. You didn't become cruel. You became discerning. You didn't lose your softness. You learned how to protect it. And now you're moving differently. You're thinking before you respond. You're watching before you trust. You're praying before you decide. You're building without announcing every move. Because you've finally learned that not every battle deserves your energy. And perhaps that's the greatest transformation of all. You don't need to defeat everyone around you. You simply need to become impossible to control. So stay with me, chosen one. Because we're about to uncover exactly what they misunderstood about your smile, your silence, your patience, and the strategic mind they never saw coming. The board is already set. And this time, you know how to move. Chosen one, there is something about your smile that people never understood. They saw it as softness. They saw it as innocence. They saw it as proof that you could be easily influenced, easily persuaded, easily hurt. But they never stopped to ask what that smile had survived. They didn't see the nights when you were fighting battles in silence. They didn't see the moments when you wanted to respond but chose peace instead. They didn't see how many times you swallowed your anger, wiped your tears, prayed through your pain, and continued moving forward when nobody was there to encourage you. They only saw the smile. And because they only saw the surface, they completely misread the person underneath it. Chosen one, your smile was never a surrender. It was composure. It was the calm of someone who had learned that reacting to everything gives other people control over your emotions. You discovered that not every insult requires an answer. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every person deserves access to your heart. And not every battle is worth fighting. While they were watching your reaction, you were watching their behavior. You noticed the inconsistencies. You noticed the changing stories. You noticed who celebrated you and who secretly competed with you. You noticed who appeared when they needed something and disappeared when you needed support. You noticed the difference between words and actions. And you remembered. You didn't need to expose them immediately because time was already revealing what they tried to hide. That's what they failed to understand about your silence. You weren't empty. You were observing. You weren't confused. You were processing. You weren't weak. You were choosing your moment. They thought they were getting away with everything because you weren't confronting them. But you were learning. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every disappointment taught you boundaries. Every painful experience taught you not to ignore your intuition. And slowly, the person they once believed they could manipulate began disappearing. You stopped giving explanations to people determined to misunderstand you. You stopped chasing people who repeatedly showed you they didn't value your presence. You stopped begging people to recognize your worth. And when you stopped needing their approval, something powerful happened. They lost the ability to control you. That was the real transformation. You didn't become cold. You became careful. You didn't become heartless. You became wise. You didn't stop loving. You simply learned that love without boundaries can become an invitation for people to take advantage of your kindness. So keep that beautiful smile, chosen one. But let it come from peace. Let it represent everything you survived. Let it remind you that the person who once reacted to every move has become someone who can pause, observe, pray, and choose wisely. They thought your smile meant they had you figured out. They never realized that behind that peaceful expression was someone learning the entire board. And now, you don't have to announce your next move. You simply have to make it. There is a side of you that people never saw coming. They thought your quietness meant you lacked confidence. They thought your humility meant you lacked intelligence. They thought your patience meant you didn't know how to fight back. But what they failed to understand is that some of the most powerful people don't need to announce their strength. They simply observe, learn, and move when the time is right. While they were busy trying to figure out how to impress others, you were learning how people actually behave. While they were talking about their plans, you were paying attention to their patterns. While they were trying to predict your next reaction, you were becoming more aware of theirs. That is why your silence became so powerful. You learned that people reveal themselves when they believe they are in control. Give someone enough room, and eventually they will show you their priorities. Let someone talk long enough, and they will reveal what they truly believe. Watch someone when they don't get what they want, and you will discover their character. You didn't need to interrogate them. You didn't need to expose them. You simply watched. And the more you watched, the more you understood. You began noticing the difference between promises and actions. You noticed who only appeared when they needed something. You noticed who celebrated your success and who secretly became uncomfortable when you started growing. You noticed who respected your boundaries and who only respected you when you were useful to them. Every observation became a lesson. Every lesson became wisdom. And eventually, you stopped making emotional moves. That was the transformation they never expected. You stopped reacting immediately. You started thinking. You started asking yourself, where does this decision lead? What happens if I respond from anger? What happens if I give this person another opportunity? What am I sacrificing just to keep someone else comfortable? Those questions changed your life. Because real strategy isn't about controlling other people. It's about controlling yourself. It's knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. It's knowing when to stay and when to walk away. It's knowing when to forgive and when to establish a boundary. It's knowing that you don't have to reveal every plan before it becomes reality. Chosen one, you didn't become a master because you wanted to defeat people. You became a master because you got tired of allowing the same patterns to hurt you. Your past trained you. Your disappointments educated you. Your failures sharpened you. Your pain taught you discernment. And your faith taught you patience. Now you're learning to move differently. You don't announce every step. You don't explain every decision. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't respond to every provocation. You pause. You observe. You pray. Then you move. And that is why people who once thought they could predict you are suddenly confused. They were watching the outside. They never understood what was being built inside. They saw the smile. They never saw the discipline. They heard the silence. They never heard the wisdom behind it. They saw your kindness. They never understood the strength required to remain kind after everything you've experienced. Chosen one, your greatest power isn't that you can outsmart everyone. Your greatest power is that you no longer need to. You have learned to protect your peace, guard your purpose, and choose your battles. You are not playing their game anymore. You're building your own life. And when you finally understand that, you realize the real checkmate was never about defeating another person. It was about becoming so wise, so disciplined, and so grounded that the things that once controlled you can no longer move you. That is the master behind the quiet. And they never saw it coming. Chosen one of the biggest mistakes people made was believing they understood you after seeing only one small part of your life. They saw your kindness and immediately called you weak. They saw your patience and called you passive. They saw your silence and assumed you had nothing to say. They saw you forgive and assumed you would tolerate anything. But they were never looking deeply enough to understand what was happening beneath the surface. They judged the chapter they witnessed without knowing the chapters that came before it. They didn't know how many times life forced you to rebuild yourself. They didn't know how many disappointments taught you to become more careful. They didn't know how many nights you had to encourage yourself when nobody else was there. They didn't know how much strength it took to remain kind after experiencing things that could have made you bitter. So when they looked at you, they saw what they wanted to see. They saw someone they believed they could predict. But you were never as simple as their assumptions. Chosen one, there was a time when you probably wanted people to understand you. You wanted to explain your intentions. You wanted to correct every false story. You wanted to prove that your heart was genuine and that your actions were never what they accused them of being. But eventually, something changed. You realized that people who are committed to misunderstanding you cannot be convinced by explanations. So you stopped trying. You allowed your actions to speak. You allowed time to reveal the truth. You allowed people to make their own choices, even when you already knew those choices would eventually reveal their character. And that was when you became much harder to manipulate. Because manipulation depends on emotional reactions. It depends on fear. It depends on guilt. It depends on your need to be accepted. But once you stopped needing everyone to approve of you, their influence became smaller. Once you stopped explaining yourself, their accusations became weaker. Once you stopped chasing people, their ability to control your attention disappeared. That is the transformation they never expected. You didn't become a different person. You became more aware of who you had always been. You began recognizing patterns before they repeated. You began listening to actions instead of promises. You began noticing how people treated you when they no longer needed anything from you. And most importantly, you began trusting yourself again. Chosen one, that doesn't mean you should become suspicious of everyone. It means you should become discerning. There is a difference between having a closed heart and having a guarded heart. A closed heart refuses to love. A guarded heart knows that love deserves wisdom. You can still be compassionate without being careless. You can still forgive without reopening every door. You can still believe in people without ignoring their behavior. You can still have a beautiful heart while having powerful boundaries. That's maturity. That's growth. And that's why some people may not recognize you anymore. They remember the version of you who always answered. They don't recognize the version who knows when silence is better. They remember the version who kept giving chances. They don't recognize the version who understands that repeated patterns require boundaries. They remember the version who needed to be understood. They don't recognize the version who is comfortable walking forward even when nobody understands. Chosen one, let them misunderstand you if they choose. You don't need to become smaller so someone else can feel comfortable. You don't need to reveal every part of yourself just to prove you're genuine. Keep growing. Keep learning. Keep your heart clean. Keep your mind clear. And let your life reveal the person they were never capable of seeing. Because sometimes the greatest response to being underestimated isn't an argument. It's becoming undeniable. There came a point in your journey when you finally understood that silence wasn't a weakness. It was protection. It was wisdom. It was the space you needed to see clearly without allowing other people's emotions to control your decisions. For a long time, you may have felt like you needed to explain yourself. When someone misunderstood you, you wanted to correct them. When someone accused you unfairly, you wanted to defend yourself. When someone walked away, you wanted them to know the truth. Your heart wanted closure, answers, and understanding. But eventually, you discovered something powerful. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Some people don't want the truth. They want a reaction. They want you angry so they can call you unstable. They want you emotional so they can dismiss your words. They want you defensive so they can shift the conversation away from what they did. And once you recognized that pattern, you stopped giving them what they wanted. You became quiet. Not because you were afraid. Because you were finished wasting your energy. Chosen one, your silence began to reveal things that your words never could. When you stopped interrupting people's behavior with your reactions, they started revealing themselves naturally. You watched who became uncomfortable when you established boundaries. You watched who suddenly changed when you stopped giving them attention. You watched who only valued you when you were useful. You watched who respected your peace and who constantly tried to disturb it. And every observation gave you another piece of the puzzle. You learned that sometimes people expose themselves when you simply stop talking. You don't have to accuse them. You don't have to investigate them. You don't have to create a confrontation. Give people enough space, and their patterns will eventually speak for themselves. That realization changed you. You stopped responding to every message immediately. You stopped explaining every decision. You stopped announcing every goal. You stopped telling everyone what you were planning. You started building quietly. You started praying privately. You started healing without needing an audience. And slowly, your life became less about proving yourself and more about becoming yourself. That's when your silence became a strategy. Not a strategy to manipulate people, but a strategy to protect your peace. You learned to pause before answering. You learned to think before making decisions. You learned to ask whether something deserved your energy before giving it your attention. And that simple change gave you power. Because when you don't react immediately, you give wisdom time to speak. When you don't rush, you see things that emotion would have hidden. When you don't chase, you discover who genuinely wants to remain in your life. When you don't explain yourself endlessly, you discover who respects you without needing a performance. Chosen one, this is why you are different now. You still have a heart. You still care. You still forgive. But you no longer confuse forgiveness with unlimited access. You no longer confuse kindness with surrender. You no longer confuse peace with weakness. And you no longer believe that every battle must be won through confrontation. Sometimes victory is simply refusing to participate. Sometimes victory is walking away without hatred. Sometimes victory is remaining silent while your life continues moving forward. So don't be ashamed of the quiet season. Don't feel guilty for protecting your energy. Don't feel pressured to explain every step. There are things God can reveal through your life that your words could never explain. Keep your heart clean. Keep your mind focused. Keep your faith strong. And when people try to pull you back into the chaos you worked so hard to escape, remember what you learned. You don't have to answer every move. You don't have to respond to every provocation. You don't have to play every game. The smartest move on the board is sometimes no move at all. Stay calm. Stay prayerful. Stay focused. And let your silence become the space where your next chapter is built. Chosen one, there is a lesson you learn that many people never understand until it is too late. You don't always have to fight someone's ego. Sometimes you simply have to stop feeding it. There were people who walked into your life believing they were above you. They spoke with confidence, acted as if they knew everything, and treated your patience like permission to disrespect you. They believed their opinions carried more weight than yours. They assumed you would always be available, always forgiving, and always willing to give them another chance. But their greatest weakness was the very thing they believed made them powerful. Their ego. They became so convinced that they had you figured out that they stopped paying attention. They stopped questioning their assumptions. They stopped noticing the changes happening within you. And while they were busy trying to prove their superiority, you were learning. You were watching how they behaved when nobody was praising them. You were noticing how they treated people who couldn't benefit them. You were recognizing how quickly their confidence disappeared whenever they were challenged. You were learning exactly what motivated them. That knowledge didn't make you cruel. It made you discerning. You realized that arrogant people often reveal more than they intend to reveal. When someone believes they are smarter than everyone around them, they eventually become careless. When someone believes they can never be wrong, they stop listening. When someone believes they have complete control, they stop preparing for consequences. And that is where their own pride begins working against them. You didn't need to push them toward failure. You didn't need to create a trap. You didn't need to manipulate their decisions. You simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. You stopped correcting every mistake. You stopped warning them about everything. You stopped trying to save people who refused to listen. And suddenly, they had to face the results of the choices they had been making all along. Chosen one, that's an important difference. Your victory isn't about destroying someone. It's about refusing to destroy yourself trying to save them. You don't have to lower yourself to prove someone else is wrong. You don't have to become bitter because someone treated you badly. You don't have to become cruel because someone was cruel to you. Your strength is knowing who you are and refusing to allow another person's behavior to rewrite your character. That's why your peace matters. That's why your boundaries matter. That's why your discipline matters. Because once you stop reacting emotionally, you stop handing other people the steering wheel of your life. They may try to provoke you. Let them. They may try to make you jealous. Let them. They may try to convince you that you're losing because you walked away. Let them believe it. You know where you're going. And sometimes the person who looks like they're losing in the moment is actually the person protecting their future. Chosen one, don't measure victory by how loudly you defeat someone. Measure it by how peacefully you continue without them. The greatest response to disrespect is not revenge. It is elevation. The greatest response to betrayal is not hatred. It is wisdom. The greatest response to being underestimated is not an argument. It is growth. And the greatest response to someone believing they had control over your life is to take that control back. So keep moving. Keep building. Keep learning. Keep your heart clean and your mind sharp. Let people carry the weight of their own choices. You don't need to carry it for them anymore. They thought their confidence made them unbeatable. They didn't realize that unchecked pride eventually blinds the person carrying it. And while they were busy trying to win against you, you were becoming someone who no longer needed to compete. That is the real checkmate. Not their downfall. Your freedom, chosen one. If you've stayed with this message until this moment, then take a second and recognize how far you've come. You are not the same person who entered those difficult seasons. You are not the same person who once questioned your worth because someone failed to recognize it. You are not the same person who believed every relationship had to be saved, every misunderstanding had to be corrected, and every accusation had to be answered. You have learned. You have grown. You have become more discerning. And most importantly, you have discovered that your peace is valuable. There will always be people who misunderstand your silence. Let them. There will always be people who underestimate your intelligence. Let them. There will always be people who remember an old version of you and expect you to remain that person forever. Let them remember. You don't have to return to the person you were simply because someone else is comfortable with that version. Your next chapter doesn't require their permission. It requires your courage. So stop looking backward at the people who underestimated you and start looking forward at the life you're building. Your greatest comeback doesn't need an audience. Your healing doesn't need applause. Your growth doesn't need validation. Sometimes the most powerful transformation happens quietly, when nobody is watching. You wake up one morning and realize that the things that once destroyed your peace no longer have the same power. The message you once waited for doesn't matter anymore. The apology you thought you needed doesn't control your happiness anymore. The opinion you once feared doesn't define you anymore. The rejection that once broke your confidence becomes proof that you survived. And suddenly, you understand. You weren't being destroyed. You were being redirected. You weren't losing everything. You were being separated from what could no longer travel with you. You weren't becoming colder. You were becoming wiser. Chosen one, Don't allow your new wisdom to turn into bitterness. Keep your heart soft, but keep your boundaries strong. Keep loving, but love with discernment. Keep forgiving, but don't ignore patterns. Keep believing in people, but believe their actions more than their promises. And above everything, keep your faith. When you don't know the next move, pray. When you feel uncertain, pray. When the road becomes difficult, pray. When everything seems silent, remember that silence does not mean God has stopped working. Sometimes the greatest moves are happening where your eyes cannot see them. Your job is not to control every outcome. Your job is to remain faithful to the path in front of you. So walk forward. Build quietly. Protect your peace. Choose your battles. And don't waste the strength you've gained trying to prove yourself to people who already made up their minds about you. Let your life speak. Let your character speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your results speak. And if someone from your past eventually looks at you and wonders when you became so different, you won't need to explain. They weren't there for the process. They didn't witness the nights you had to rebuild. They didn't hear the prayers you whispered when nobody else knew you were struggling. They didn't see the moments when you chose to keep going. But you did. And God did. That's enough. So, chosen one, take your next move with wisdom. Don't move from revenge. Move from purpose. Don't move from anger. Move from peace. Don't move because you need to prove them wrong. Move because you finally understand who you are becoming. And if this message spoke to you, type 777 in the comments as a declaration that you're entering a new chapter with wisdom, faith, discipline, and peace. Hit the like button, subscribe to Chosen One Focus, and stay connected for more messages designed to strengthen your faith and remind you of the power God is developing within you. Remember this before you leave. Your smile is not weakness. Your silence is not defeat. Your kindness is not stupidity. Your patience is not surrender. Your past is not your identity. And the people who underestimated you do not get to decide your future. The board is still in front of you. The pieces are still moving. The story is still being written. So make your next move carefully. Make it prayerfully. Make it boldly. And then keep walking. Because the greatest checkmate isn't watching someone else lose. It's waking up one day and realizing that you became everything they never expected you to become. Chosen one, your next chapter is waiting. Smile with peace. Move with wisdom. Walk with faith. And never forget who you are.